Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 103.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, bringing you the custom club fitting experience of your life and lower scores, always. When I did podcast number 100, brief pause to go, da-da, with David Orr, we talked a lot about the importance of the internal stories that golfers tell themselves and how these affect their putting and golfing performance. Well, I decided to check some online and on Amazon.com and see if there had been any great books published about the importance of story and personal performance. And did I hit the jackpot? I am so delighted that Bob Litwin, author of Live the Best Story of Your Life, agreed to do this interview with me. This is a golf performance and life performance changing book. I've listened to the audiobook version once already and bought the book version. And Bob and this book are amazing. So enjoy this podcast with Bob Litwin. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast. I was fortunate a few weeks ago to discover Bob Litwin's amazing book, Live the Best Story of Your Life, A World Champion's Guide to Lasting Change. Bob has used the process outlined in his book for about 40 years to work with thousands of athletes and businessmen to achieve extraordinary performance, but it isn't also working with other folks. He went from not winning tennis matches to 19 national titles, a world championship, and number one in the world in the 55 and over age category. And, you know, if there are other things there, Bob, you've got a lot of things behind you in terms of the value of what you've done. So thanks for sharing this with us today.
Oh, I love it. I'm happy to do it, Tony. Thank you for having me on.
It's going to be very interesting today. Well, you know, let's dive into it. You know, this podcast today is all about the power of story. And I always ask people up front, you know, kind of what is their story and what led you to write your book. So go into that a bit, please. Well,
what got me to write the book, when I first started to teach tennis, I was doing that. I was a school teacher. I'm not going all the way back, but yeah. I was a school teacher, and this school wanted to have a tennis program, and because I played high school tennis, they picked me to be the coach. And one thing led to another, and I found that I was able to teach people, because I was a teacher, I could teach people to play tennis, even though I was not that well versed in the sport itself. I played in high school, but it wasn't even my primary sport. I was a basketball player.
Okay.
But here I was filling in for some tennis pro and who didn't used to show up for his lessons. And, you know, people were saying, well, give me a lesson. And I just really didn't understand the techniques and strategy of the game. So what I started to do basically was to ask people when they hit a good shot or a bad shot, like, what happened? What'd you do? What were you thinking about? And they would, you know, tell me, well, I just was like so frustrated. I didn't care. I just swung at it. I said, like, okay, let's work on that. Let's work on not caring. So what happens when you give tennis lessons, it may be true in golf lessons too, is the coaches spend a lot of time supporting people in the work that they're doing. And the way we do that is we continually tell them a pretty optimistic story about what's going on.
Yeah.
So in tennis, if the ball is going, they're working on their forehand, trying to get more height and depth on the shot, and the ball's going into the net, and they're moaning and complaining, it's not working. as a coach, you end up having to come up with some story that helps them. Like, well, you're making progress, or look how far you've come from where you were before you swung and missed. Or in golf, yeah, you're hitting it off the toe, but before you were like barely making contact at all. You're finding your way. So without realizing it, I spent hour after hour after hour telling people better stories than the stories they had. I didn't call them stories at the time, but what I started to notice was like my colleagues who were teaching technique and strategy, people were getting good at technique and strategy, but they weren't getting particularly better at being able to effectively use that when there was a $5 bet on the line, or it was a tournament. It's like, yeah, great. Yeah, you're great off the practice tee, but how do you deal with the challenges of being on the first tee and people waiting, or in being up 40-love and losing the lead? And to me, it became about stories. And I didn't come up with the idea of stories, but I had practiced it so much without realizing it that as I started to write my book, it sort of morphed into my model of coaching that I had always done instinctively. When I started to write the book, frankly, it was going to be a book about loss. I had lost my wife.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how many people who listen have written a book. I mean, I've written for a long time, but this was my first like full-fledged effort at really finishing a book. And, you know, it started off as one thing and it morphed into like, well, facing adversity. And then it morphed into, what does that really mean, facing adversity? It means like dealing with things that generally happen in life or on the court or on the course or at home in business. There are all these stories that tend to interfere with us being extraordinary. And our stories often are true. You know, like, I have difficulty making a putt. Okay, that's your story. That's a true story. But how does running that story in your mind really help you? It doesn't. I always say to people, how's that story working for you? It's like, not well. So I would say to them, so like, what if we change the story to say that I'm a diligent worker. I focus deeply when on the green. And they go like, yeah, great. But I don't. I'm like, I know you don't. But what you do is you get up there and you're like, really like, you have this underlying story. It was like, I can't putt under pressure. I can't make a 3-foot putt. And that story can create, in some cases, 0.1% of tension, which is just enough to miss a putt by like 5 feet. So the story concept pretty much morphed as I was writing it, and more I would look back at my notes from people I had worked with, whether it was in business or in sports or in life in general, and I would have the stories that they wrote, their old story and their new story, and I pretty much would put those in the book or compilations of people. And now I think that I'm kind of known as the story guy. I used to be known as the focus coach, but now I'm the story coach. And I'm happy to have found it. And it's a wonderful model for teachers, for parents, for athletes, with or without coaches. It just works really well. And it's just one other thing about it. People say like, oh, you mean like goals, right? I'm like, well, you can call them goals. That's fine. But like, really, goals are pretty static. They're not that exciting. When you get to achieve the goal, it's like, now what? Or people will say, well, oh, maybe you mean like having an intention, right? It's like, you can call it what you want. I happen to like the word stories because it's a very flexible, malleable way to approach who you are and what you want to be.
It's so funny. You said, I'm going to share a little story myself here because I started writing different things about stories and tasks and things, but in a little notebook. I get a Moleskine notebook and I write it, okay? Right. And I write these things every day, okay? I go and just as a way of reinforcing them. But at the bottom of the second page, I write 3 words and the connection between them. And one of them is story, and one of them is intent, and one of them is goals. Isn't that funny that you would say those 3? I mean, honestly.
Right. That's funny.
Because to me, there's kind of a loop between all of them, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean any of them is more important, but I think all of them are important in how they relate to to creating improvement. Okay.
Yeah, and I think they're pretty interchangeable. Actually, I mean they are distinct in their own way, but they're all about the same thing, which is where do you want to go?
Yeah.
It's like, who do you want to be? And for me, working with stories is more often about who are you now? Like, I'm a nervous person, or I'm impatient, or I get uptight. And who do you aspire to be? More than what do you do and what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Because what you want to do, like a lower handicap, flows out of who you might need to be. Like, I love competition. I welcome adversity. The pressure is the sweetest moments. I love the pressure. It's the sweetest moments when people don't really have that story. I think that, all of those words are interchangeable, but it is quite interesting that those are the words that are at the bottom. By the way, Tony, when you write your stories, just out of curiosity, do you write the initial story first, which is where you currently are, before you write?
Yeah, no, I don't, and we're going to come back to that as we talk. But I mean, and I think I have kind of sort of that traditional block of not getting to that point of it, right? I mean, I know what some of them are, but yeah, let's come back to that because I think that's a fabulous question. Yeah. And that really leads into the second question a little bit too, because I listened to your book. I bought the copy of the book too, but I listened to it on Audible. And what struck me as you get near the end of the book is you talking about the story actually of it took a long time to write the book. And there's some messages in there about the fact that it took a long time because changing the story helped you to get to the point of actually finishing the book, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, well, that's one of the most fun or interesting parts of the whole process of writing the book, which was, here I am, the story coach, and I do tell good stories in order to move out of my bad stories frequently. And one of the stories that I had, I was 3 years into the book, and I was working with an editor, and I said, I'm really, really worried I'm not going to be able to finish this book. I've started and not finished 3 or 4 books already. I have unfinished manuscripts on my desk. And she said to me, you got to be kidding me. It's I've never met anybody who finishes things more than you. Here you didn't win tennis matches and you became number 1 in the world. And here you were a tennis pro, and you became this, relatively well-known, successful Wall Street coach and working with all kinds of successful people. It's you finish everything. And I was yeah, but I don't know. I just don't know. I can't finish a book. So that was 3 years in. Now, at the beginning of the 5th year, I moved to Colorado, and the book had been sold based on being 80% done, sold to a publisher, and they were putting the squeeze on me with deadlines, which I didn't have to deal with in the first few years, and I just was struggling. Not that I had written the last chapter last, because you kind of jump around. It's not a linear experience, but I got to that, looking at the last chapter, and I was no, I don't know how to finish this. I just don't know how to finish it. So there I was writing, and I started to write as I usually do when I play tennis tournaments, and I write from my heart about what's going on. And I figured, all right, the best thing is for me to write about the difficulty I'm having. So I started writing the last chapter I've had this terrible story. Here I am in the last chapter, and I have this terrible story that I can't finish writing a book. And so this is going on right now for me. I need a better story. And I wrote, and as I'm writing the chapter, I write in the chapter, here is my new story. My new story is I'm a finisher. My new story is I am a finisher. Yeah. And as I was writing the chapter, I found that was the ultimate conclusion to the book, which is I had an old story that wasn't working, that was keeping me from accomplishing something. I had a new story that as I wrote about it, I discovered the finisher in me. And then I was able to finish it with the last line that I had written several years earlier, which was, so you write your old, you write your new, you become a new person, you accomplish new things. What's next? Write a new story. And hopefully the first line of your new story is, I'm a story writer. Yeah. And I was like, and then I did what many authors say is the most difficult thing, is you type the end. It's the end. And I was like, oh my God, I finished it. It's like, this is it. I don't even need to go back. So, some people think that I don't have bad stories or, need to do this, but I am no different than other people. I sometimes go into a funky place and don't even realize I have a bad story going on. And just if I can say a little bit more about that the progression in becoming somebody who does use stories in order to move forward, to get unstuck, over time, I went from not noticing my old stories to noticing them like a month after they started going on, to noticing them like a week after, to noticing them kind of in the moment that they were going on. And then the next progression was, when would I write a new story? At first, it would take me weeks to write a new story. Now I can say that, at least for me, when I realize I have a bad story, the time between that and writing a new story can be seconds. Because for me to not write the new story is me basically saying, I want to stay with my old story. I want to be my old story. And it's like, nope, not me. I don't want to do that. But sometimes I don't notice my old stories. But writing is a great way to discover them.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, and it leads a little bit into, and we're going to talk about some of the chapters in the book, okay, and connect some of it with golf things, I hope.
Sure, yeah.
One of the chapter titles gets back to a little bit about things we've already talked about, but I think it's still worthwhile, and that is the beast before the bounty, right? And it relates to, and you talked about other people that I know about, have connected with, Stephen Pressfield and all these people that not everybody who listens to this will know, but, it's sort of the resistance and how important it is to be able to acknowledge the present story if you're going to make a change. It's not just, okay, I want to do a new story. I think there's something important about understanding what the old one is first that gets you to the new one, right?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure we need to understand it. Like, okay. One of the differences between my work as a performance coach and a therapist, which I'm clearly not, is that I'm not really all that concerned about the past. I feel like, the power of the present is much stronger than the past, and that, we tend to get stuck in, well, I've always been this way, and, it's hard to change. And, my thing is, like, change is not hard. Change is easy. It's going on all the time. All you need to do is set sail. I mean, our whole universe is changing every single moment that we're here. To think that we are not changing is ludicrous. We're part of it. So if we can just kind of, get the rudder in the right place so that we're changing in the direction we want, it's pretty helpful. So the idea is that this is an old rap, but if you get a map and you say, okay, how do you get to San Francisco? Well, the question I would say to Tony is, well, where the heck are you first? It's like, you can't use a map to go somewhere unless you know where you're starting. Otherwise, you're in a lot of trouble. You're in Tennessee. I'm in Boulder. We're going to start in a different place in order to get to a clear objective. So getting in touch or being, just kind of like getting clear on what is your current story is where you kind of do a little introspection. It doesn't need to be like a life story, a life narrative, but you just kind of come up with a list of ideas or thoughts, beliefs, feelings, things you say to people, ways you act that you're pretty sure are not the best version of yourself, even if there are things that you feel like that's the way you always are. And even if you use certain phrases to get there, like, well, I've always been like this, or if only I were not this way, then I could do that, or it's hard for me because ... like I don't get to play as much as somebody else, or I used to be like this and I've never been able to change. Those are the clues to what your old story might be. And even if you only come up with 3 or 4, they become a starting point for writing a new story, which is maybe more difficult for people. I think emotionally it's harder for people to write their old story, because some people write their old story and they say to me like, oh my God, I can't get out of bed now. I'm like, I can't believe this is who I am. I'm depressed. And I said, you know what? It's okay. I mean, all right, you're saying you're depressed, but really you're probably annoyed at yourself for being this way. Good. Get annoyed, get irritated about it, use it for motivation to flip the story. And your story is not fiction, it's real. Your new story is fiction. So you can go with it any way you want. If you're saying that you're like depressed because my old story is like it's beating me down, that's a story that can change, which is I see who I am. Changes to this person who I am are so important to me. Okay, so that's a better story, and it may get you taking a step. So very important, Tony, that people start with the old story, write it out. Writing is better than just thinking it. When you write it, you can look at it. You can see it in a detached way. You might even be able to look at it and say, like, boy, if this was somebody else's story, I could really fix it, because we're really good at fixing other people's stories. And when you have a detached look at it, it might be a kind of a nasty story in your mind, but it's still the opportunity that's right there to change any part of it in words. And then you get on the path to make the changes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. You said in the book we're made up of software, not hardware, which I thought was a fascinating little statement too. As I was reviewing this morning before going back, and that almost is like a story too, right, in itself.
Yeah.
If you accept that possibility that you can make change.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I quite understand when somebody says to me, I can't change. I understand when they say they can't change their eye color and they can't change the size of their foot. But what do you mean you can't change? I mean, like, you do change. You change all through your life in different ways. And when somebody says I can't change, I say, okay, that's your story. How's that working for you? And then they go, it's like, well, it's keeping me the same. Well, okay, you okay with that? Because if so, fine. Okay, I'm not telling you have to change. But if there's something in your system, in your story that's not working, you can write a new story. And the possibility of change goes up exponentially because something happens. It is like an intention all of a sudden that you get drawn there, like one step even, a small step. And a small step is change.
Yeah.
And you build on it.
Now, the book is oriented in a really neat way, and these next two questions kind of relate to each other. But the first one is, it's about you have personal coaching sessions. And maybe since you have had some experiences with golfers, talk about perhaps 3 or so of the story approaches that you have found to be specifically helpful for golfers that you've worked with in terms of helping them to improve their performance.
Yeah, sure. So interestingly, Tony, is that I wanted my book to only be 3 chapters.
Huh.
And the publisher said, we can't publish a 3-chapter book. We just can't. I mean, it's like we don't do booklets. And you got to put a little more meat in there. But my message was very, very clear that I was putting out, which is like, old stories limit us. They keep us from going where we want to go. New stories free us up. And here's how you write the stories, and here's how you get moving on them. And that's all I really wanted to say. But he said, you got to get some things in there that help people. And I realized that in my years of coaching, that a lot of coaching is giving people ways in which they stay in the game when they lose hope, when they're trying to make changes and they're trying and they're not making progress. And I started to think about the things that I used to say to people in sessions, whether it was tennis lessons or working with a golfer. So these 33 chapters were basically just coach speak, things that many coaches say without realizing how important they are in helping people move forward. And if you were out on the course with me and you were struggling with something, not that I teach golf, but I teach how to be a great golfer. But if you're struggling, you're slicing balls, or you're hooking the ball, or whatever's going on, your balance is not good, and you're trying, Well, I might say something like, well, you have to maintain a positive attitude. Even though that's Sports Psychology 101, it still deserves a chapter in my book about, well, what does that mean? Here are some examples of being positive and people who have managed to use positivity to get better. It's not that any of these 33 chapters in and of themselves are profound. What they are means by which people can get on the horse if they've fallen off. So I have like maybe 3 or 4 that are my favorites across the board.
That's great. That's perfect.
So one of them is a chapter that's called Kaizen. And Kaizen is a Japanese word that means ongoing incremental improvement. And to me, if you want to really continue to grow, maintaining an attitude of Kaizen, which is every time I go out there, there can be incremental improvement, maybe not massive change instantly. And golfers are famous for massive change for like 3 days. It's like,
right, for 3 days, yeah.
Yeah, I got it. This is it. I got the takeaway. I've got it figured out. This is it. And then like 4 days later, they hear from somebody else like about getting a little lower or like keeping your head still, right? So Kaizen takes the pressure off the need to become different quickly, because if we're impatient, we generally get in our own way. So Kaizen means ongoing incremental improvement. So when I work with a young tennis player who is going to get better, they're 14 years old. I mean, I always say, you think this is the best you're ever going to be? No. I said, well, okay, we don't know how fast you're going to get better, but we do know that every time you go on the court for practice or play a match or a lesson, every single time you're out there is the opportunity for you to improve incrementally. And then another one of the sessions is look back to see how far you've come.
I like that one. That was I think, near the end of it, wasn't it? To allow yourself the fun of doing that, right?
Yeah, and to give yourself a break a little bit and realize, like, my God, it's like, look, I'm here in Colorado and I've been here for 3 years and I've learned to hike. And, while hiking, it's an effort of trying to put one foot in front of the other, and that's great. But you're just feeling like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. And then you look back to like, oh my God, I'm at 11,000 feet. I started at 9. Wow, I've come a long distance. I can do this. So looking back to see how far you've come is a way to stay in the game, to not lose hope that you are improving. A third one, and this is like probably the one that I like as far as like my life goes, what I want most in my life. And it's another Japanese word. The word is shoshin, S-H-O-S-H-I-N, which of course when I write it on my computer often corrects it to shushin.
Yeah,
to
right.
shoeshine.
Oh, gee.
People say, like, what is shoeshine? It's like, oh, my computer again misspelled it. Okay, so shoshin is a word that was in a book called, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind.
Oh, yeah.
And this Zen teacher was writing for basically us, people in the United States who didn't really get Zen Buddhism at all. And he used the word shoshin, and the word means child's mind, beginner's mind. So anybody who's had a child, especially a child is like 3 months old, 4, 5, 6 months old, you see the living experience of shoshin where everything that they are doing is brand new. Their fascination with newness allows them to learn things really, really quickly. Like when they first discover their thumb, they put it in their ear, they put it in their mouth, they put it in their nose, they put it in the food, and they discover their thumb. And when they discover like a spoon, they have a party with a spoon without any judgment, with no criticism of figuring it out. And they do the same thing with balance and with walking and talking. And those experiences are Shoshin experiences, and they're very special. And, many of our Shoshin experiences that we've had are amongst the best experiences of our life, like looking up at the sky when you're a teenager, like you're lying on the hood of the car, you go like, oh my God, that is big. We are small. That's a Shoshin experience. Or sitting on the beach and watching the waves, or when a child is born to somebody, it's like it's an experience of total presence. And to find Shoshin when playing golf is to experience every hole as if it's the first time you've ever played it. Every swing like the first time you've ever taken the swing. Not level-wise, because you've progressed in your level, but to be so present in it that you can find a really special moment. Hopefully you find a special moment 72 times or 75 times or 80, whatever the number is.
Whatever works for you. Right.
Wherever you are, that the more often you have a Shoshin experience, the greater chance that there's going to be less in number in golf, and in tennis maybe more shots.
Yeah.
Or hits. So Shoshin is powerful, and I try to find Shoshin in my life every day. It's not easy because we've trained ourselves to not be in the present, but I think it's powerful. The last one of that I would say is crucial in sports is dancing with the beast. And I wrote about that recently after my last tennis tournament, that I had an injury that impacted on my ability to be the best I could be physically. And tennis includes the beast of injuries. You know, when you get older like me, you know, you don't always feel 100%. You might have an injury. You might be tight, sore, tired. Well, that's one of the beasts of playing in tennis tournaments as a senior player. And one of the beasts of being a golfer is missing a 3-foot putt that would get you at even on 17. It's a beast. It happens. There are beasts in golf that are happening all the time. A beast of golf is that you hit a great shot and the fairway is running fast and you end up rolling into a sand trap. Another is a beast could be you're in the rough and the ball you hit to get out of the rough hits a leaf and your ball goes off 5 degrees to the right and you end up in the water hazard or not. A beast is that the lip in the sand trap hangs over a little bit and you hit a perfect shot. It gets caught up. It rolls back down to your feet. So these beasts, which are in all sports, the beasts that are in business, I work with Wall Street people, the beast for them is like an irrational market and like volatility of their own profit and loss statement moment by moment. And I always say, if you can't deal with the beast, you shouldn't be in that business. So I personally welcome the beast. I pull the beast in close. I dance with the beast. It's not my enemy. I can't make it my enemy. I need to make it my partner in this journey of trying to be effective, be a good coach, win a tennis match, learn something new. And it's a very, very powerful thing. Let me say another thing about it, that I worked with a young runner. She was one of the best high school milers in the country. And she had a bad run when her parents called me, and she told me her story. And one part of her story was like, I fear that when the pain comes in running, I'm going to slow down. And I had said to her, like, why don't you get in better shape? And she was like, duh. Do you ever run? I said, like, I run 15 feet on a tennis court. There's no pain. So she says, well, in running, there is pain. In every distance race, every great runner will feel pain. And they need to, because it's a demonstration that they're putting out the right energy. But I fear that when the pain comes, they're going to slow down. And we switched her story to, like, pain is my running partner. And she wrote, then, for me, running with the beast is more important to me than running a good time. And running with the beast allowed her to run a good time because she no longer feared it. So those are four of 33.
You know, it's interesting. A week or so ago, Roger Bannister passed away, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you noted that, but, you know, it would have been interesting to have had a discussion with him. I did listen to a book about you know, him breaking the 4-minute mile, but he had to be in that realm to have done it, right? Because people didn't experience the kind of pain that he went through at the time of making that, you know, that accomplishment, right?
Yeah, and if you've ever seen Chariots of Fire, which is similar, I guess, or about that in some way, the joy on that guy's face while he was like running, he was not feeling great physically. Believe me, it's like you don't run those speeds and feel like, oh, this is like a run in the park. It's like you are just killing it, and your body is like your legs are screaming and your chest is burning, and you know, but the joy on that guy's face, he was like, enjoy to be in that experience. So imagine one of your golfers being in the joy of like, all right, I'm in the rough. Like Bubba Watson is like, cool, I'm going to get a chance at a shot I've never hit. Or like Phil, you know, Mickelson, you know, he seems to love being in those difficult situations. And even Tiger was.
Oh, definitely Tiger,
you know,
too. Yeah.
You know, Earl always said, you know, it's like I put him in difficult situations in training because he will have them. And they're part of his game to be in difficulty. And so they basically, those guys pull the beast in close with them. It's all well and good to hit one straight down the middle on a beautiful fairway and be just the right distance for your iron to the green, but like, you better not count on that. That's not happening that much.
Yeah.
Not 18 times in a row, you're not going to be in the right spot.
Not many times. That's right.
Right.
Well, you know, the other I thought as neat as anything part of your book was what you called in it the big but, because you know, there's lots of books and there's lots of discussion that people have, and you know, say do this, right?
Yeah.
But do this is just not enough to me,
Yeah.
and it's some from my experience and things I did in my engineering life. But to acknowledge what people will often come up with when there's something. So talk about how the big but came about, and you maybe give one example of one of the big buts in the book, and how important it is.
Well, again, you know, working with a publisher is not the greatest experience in the world because they give you a lot of opinions because they're publishers, they're not writers.
Yeah.
So, but they say, for you to sell a book, and they had forced me basically to come up with all this other material, which was the 33 chapters. And I realized they're not really tips. They're not something that's a tip that you need to get good at. And that in my life, I had given people guidelines or suggestions or tips like these. And I heard plenty of responses like, I know, but
yeah,
it's like,
it's always,
I know,
it's not I know and, it's I know but.
Right. And we know that but tends to wipe out everything that comes before it. So I thought I better address all these buts that I've heard. And I called them the big but. And then I would respond, their but might be, well, you say to be positive, but isn't that going to give me a false sense of illusion? I'm kidding myself. It doesn't motivate me. Or maybe the idea of dancing with the beast, or Kaizen, say like, I don't have enough time to just improve incrementally. You know, what happens if I'm not improving fast? But what if I'm not improving fast enough? And then my response is like, that's your big but. Why don't you try this on for size? And I'll answer it. I'll say, look, I understand that for you, it's important for you to get better faster. That's your but. You don't have to use Kaizen at all then. Find another one. Find one of these things. If your butt is so big, I'm not going to try and talk you out of your butt. But I would say you have 33 different opportunities here to find something that will push you forward. So, I mean, I'm accepting of the big butt, and I don't really argue with people when they have a butt. I always say, like, listen, it's not about learning all 33 of these things. It's about finding some as tools that you can use when you seem to have lost your way or lost hope or lost faith, or it's just not working in your mind. These are easy things that you can bring in as long as there's one that doesn't have a big butt for you. Yeah. And look, listen, as a teacher, you know that some people have a big butt about everything, and those people, if I am coaching them, they are often people that I'll fire. Believe it or not.
Well, no, fire. Really. That's right. I understand that too. That's right.
Yeah, and it's not a mean thing. I mean, I'll be saying is, look, we're not a fit. I mean, you're really invested in resistance and saying no, and I get it. I'm not judging you for it, but like you're wasting your time with me, and I'm very success oriented. I want to win, and that means I want to be able to help you change. if we're not on the same page, this is not a win for me. And it is amazing how that motivates people. They don't like getting fired.
They say, no, I don't want that, right? Yeah. That's great. I think we're gonna jump into the last question, because I think it probably say a bunch of things there, but and that is, what's are some final words and suggestions, based on the book, based on experiences that you want golfers to remember at the end here? I mean, obviously, and I think obviously, golfers who want to get better, I think that they're going to get a lot out of your book. But just in general, things to help them play their best golf.
Well, I don't know how many of your listeners have read Golf in the Kingdom by Michael Murphy.
Yeah.
Which was really like a precursor to a lot of other, Bagger Vance and did Pressfield write Bagger Vance? He wrote Bagger Vance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and there were a couple of others, Tin Cup, whatever, where there were these spiritual messages. I think that just, I would suggest that people pick up that book, because what Michael Murphy talked about was an experience he had where it was an allegory. I mean, it really didn't happen, but he wrote about playing at this golf course in Scotland, and and he had to play with these two local people. One was a teacher, and the other was the student. And the teacher basically said to his student, this is the really short version, on the first 6 holes, only concern yourself with pure contact. Just make good contact. Don't be concerned about where the ball goes. Don't be concerned about how many shots you have to take to get it in the hole. Just work on pure contact. In the next 6 holes, from 7 through whatever that would be, 13.
12.
That's
yeah.
7 through 12. Only work on your most beautiful flowing swing. Whether you make contact or not, whether you hit it straight or not, just take a great swing. And then for your last 6 holes, you can go ahead and have a party with score. And it was a really meaningful book for me when I read it, because it really was addressing the idea, and this is what I want to say, is that it addressed the idea of results happen after. And if we give too much attention to our results, our score, how we're doing, how the last shot was, what you need to do on the next shot, I don't mean which club to pick or how to swing properly, but I got to get it up close. You tend to interfere with pure playing. And golf is still a game. And if people can get themselves into the play aspect, even though they might have a few bucks on it, even though they might be wanting to win the club championship, their likelihood of playing free will increase. And if you play free, you still may or may not win. But the experience becomes an extraordinary experience of never being a long walk ruined. Never.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful walk. So to me, the biggest thing for athletes I work with, for hedge fund people, is I know that winning is part of it. Winning the score, making money, having a low score, getting to 6 in a set before the other guy. I know that. I compete. I care about that too. But there are so many other things to care about, like how are you dealing with the beasts? Are you being patient? Are you really honestly being a good person in the foursome and being congratulatory and not in the deep recesses of your mind hoping that your opponent's going to screw up? Are you somebody who's not making excuses? The course is too wet, or it's playing too fast. There are so many reasons I play tennis that are all wins for me. Maybe there's 10 or 12. If I win the match, it's fine. If I don't win the match, but I win 5 or 6 of these other pieces, like dealing with pressure effectively, being a good winner, being a good loser, seeing that the pressure moments are the sweetest moments. If I'm winning in those, I win when I'm done. When I'm shaking hands at the end of a match, I've won. And look, even on my best days, I don't win matches. It can happen. And to free yourself from the from the shackles and the chains of result orientation is a way to really fly. It's a way to be free. It's a way to end up playing in what's perceived as pressure situations in a relaxed, calm, physically loose way, and a way that we end up being able to possibly access the highest end of our talent and skill.
And that's all anybody ever really wants, I think, too. When you get down to it. Of course, they don't think they do, right? I mean, that's right. Even if they were there, sometimes some of us wouldn't know it necessarily. But it sure is a great way to be.
And if somebody plays at the high end of their talent and skill, and on 18 they bogey when the other guy pars and the other guy wins, they'll say, "Yeah, I played amazing. I played great, but I missed that putt." Right. And you know what? And another day you're going to make that putt, and maybe you're not playing at the high end of your talent and skill, and if that's good for you, that's fine. But the experience of going out there and feeling like you've put in 3 hours, 18 holes, 80 shots at the high end of your talent and skill, what more can you ask for? Really? Because the winning and losing is really the thing that's most out of our control. The other guy can play better. The other guy might have gotten lucky and he lipped and it dropped in. And yours lipped and it didn't. And it's almost not worth even talking about. And the guy who's in the 19th hole, who lost on the 18th hole, he's the one who can say, "You know what? I played amazing today. I'm satisfied. I can't ask more of myself." And doesn't say, "But I wish I had made that putt." Of course you do. But own it. Be a good winner. Be a good loser.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, this is what I expected. I have been looking forward to getting to talk with you for a couple of weeks once I first found your book, because I knew it was something very amazing. So thanks for writing it and sharing it with people. And I'm going to put links in my show notes to the book, but also to your website. And, you had some recent posts about, as you said, about the matches that you played in the event. And they're instructive by themselves, and I hope people will take the time to go back and look at those, and also just to subscribe to the posts that you have, because they're
actually,
great.
People just some mechanical thing, which is that people who sign up for my website are not going to be getting the posts.
Okay.
Because I'm not using the website as a way to deliver it. I'm doing it a different way. So if people are interested in getting my posts, they should just send me an email. Okay. And the email they should use is this: Litwin, Litwin, Bob, B-O-B, @gmail.com. Or they can use my regular email that's on the website. And actually, if they can, you can also have your listeners wait a week. I have to post all of those journal entries from the tournament last week on my website. I'm making this changeover, so it's taking me a little time to do it. But they'll be there in a week, and then people can just go directly. All right?
That's great. Bob, again, thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, just hang in for a second. Afterwards, I'll turn this off. And thanks again for sharing. Appreciate it.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me on. You're a really good interviewer. Keep it up.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Bob, thanks for your work and your passion, and for writing Live the Best Story of Your Life. To me, it's a little interesting that after reading this book, I keep listening to the stories that I hear some of my golfing friends tell themselves, and how these stories have an obvious influence on their golf games and their performance on the golf course. The show notes include a link to Amazon.com where you can buy Bob's book. And if you also want to read his blog posts, you need to email him directly to get them. I included his email address also in the show notes. And I want to say again in closing that Bob's work already has had a major influence on me, on the internal stories I tell myself about my golf game, about my business, and also, maybe more importantly, about my life. Well, that's it for today. Just a note that my next podcast will probably not go live until Tuesday, April 17th, since I'll be away on a 6-day golf trip before then. I wonder if I'm going to tell a few different stories for that trip than I usually do. Maybe we'll find out. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com